चैतन्यमयी सत्यमयी परमे आनन्दमयी चैतन्यमयी सत्यमयी परमे आनन्दमयी चैतन्यमयी सत्यमयी परमे सत्यमयी परमे सत्यमयी परमे सत्यं ज्ञानं सत्यं ज्ञानं ज्योतिररविन्द सत्यं ज्ञानं सत्यं ज्ञानं ज्योतिररविन्द सत्यं ज्ञानं सत्यं ज्ञानं ज्योतिररविन्द ज्योतिररविन्द Okay, so just to recap Sri Aurobindo's whole thrust of yoga, we all know it, but the context lends itself to what we are discussing today. Darwin's theory of evolution, we all know it, right? That in creation first there was the mineral kingdom, the stone became the plant became the animal, and the animal became man. But science cannot tell us exactly what it is that made the first stone sprout into plant life, or what made the first plant cell mutate to an animal cellular organism. But yoga says that there are two principles in existence, spirit and matter. And spirit involutes means loses itself in matter, and then molds matter to create more and more conscious forms of life. So a plant is more conscious than a stone, and an animal is more conscious than a plant, and a human being is more conscious. Conscious doesn't mean better, it means more capable of a response. So a human being is more conscious than an animal because he is capable of thinking in words. An animal is functioning at a vital level. And Sri Aurobindo says that as imperfect an creature like man cannot be the crowning glory of nature's creative impulse, that we have to evolve to the next species called the supramental, above mind, a species which won't think in words but will be in direct touch with the truth consciousness and will function out of that. So keep this context in mind as we go into our talk today. The talk is called The Secret of the Earth. This is from Satprem's Mind of the Cells. We have played long enough with electric trains, penicillin, and electronic chromosomes. What if it were time for another game? Another discovery in a pure heartbeat of an unknown man beneath his worn-out cloak. 22 years old, fresh out of hell and in rage, I took life, that deceitful witch, on my lap and said, now it's between the two of us. You tell me your secret and no nonsense. Your secret, which is not found in books or science or machines, which is neither from the west nor the east nor any country, but from the country of the true earth. Your secret beating in my naked heart. I moved heaven and earth. I tried everything. So we know Satprem's history, right? He'd been to the Nazi concentration camps. He'd been through all kinds of things before he came to the mother. So you can understand why he writes so strongly. I tried everything. Oh, I wanted to compel this devastated human flesh, this hopeless and accursed earth, this wonderful earth, to cry out its secret. I roamed continents. I listened to the beat of the phantom gongs at the Thebes and Luxor. I plunged into the red trails of Afghanistan and unearthed Greco-Buddhist heads, but there was still no smile on my lips. I climbed the slopes of the Himalayas, dug into eagles' nests in search of the treasure of the Rajput princes. I smoked opium to the point of drowning. I hammered at all the doors of this body, but the secret was still not there. I plunged into the Guana's rainforest and listened to the shrieks of red monkeys at night, like a bestial choir at the beginning of the worlds. I crossed Brazil and Africa, ever looking for a gold or mica or any kind of mine. But the mine deep within still did not divulge its secret. I came back to confront myself in India. I grasped the secret of the yogis. I meditated and got lost on rarefied summits with them. But the earth, this earth, still would not tell me its wonder. I was a beggar on the roads. I pushed the body to the end of its tether. I prayed in temples, knocked on all doors, but the only door that could fill my heart at last would not open. There I was, naked again. Was there no hope but to pile up electronic machines, bombs, and false wisdom? Or true wisdom that takes you to heaven but leaves this earth to decay on its 2 feet? And then he further says, one day when I was 30, I met her with a capital H who said otherwise. She was 80. She was young and full of mirth like a little girl. She was called Mother. It was in Pondicherry on the shores of the Bay of Bengal. Mother is the most wonderful adventure I have known. The last door that opens when all others have closed on nothing. For 15 years she took me on unknown paths leading into man's morrow, or perhaps into his real beginning. My heart was beating as if for the first time ever. Mother is the secret of the earth. No, she is not a saint, not a mystic, not a yogi. She is not from the east or the west. She is not a miracle worker either, or a guru or a founder of a religion. Mother is the discoverer of man's secret, After he has been stripped of his machines, his religions, his spiritualisms and his materialisms, his Western or Eastern ideologies, when he is himself simply a heart beating and calling for the earth of truth, simply a body calling for the truth of the body, like the seagull's cry for space and high wind. Very poetic, but we don't understand why he's calling Mother the secret of the earth, right? So far we don't know. We can understand that Mother is this thing we adore, this person we turn to, but why is Satprem calling her the secret of the earth? Any idea?
She's considered the creatrix. She's
Okay.
from what is created to return back to the source of that.
So she's the creatrix, but after creation happens, where is she?
She is in the seed of the creation.
Right. She's the secret of the earth because she is seeded in all of creation. When we say spirit is involuted in matter and is working in matter to create more and more conscious forms of life, Mother is that spirit which is involuted in matter, which is present in matter. Okay? And we'll explore more of this in her own words. She's given us this very precious gift, 13 volumes of agenda, where she has described her working at a very cellular level. So this is from Savitri, again about Mother. For this she had accepted the mortal breath. The Mother had come down, accepted the mortal breath for this. To wrestle with the shadow she had come, and must confront the riddle of man's birth and life's brief struggle in dumb matter's night, whether to bear with ignorance and death, or hew the ways of immortality. To win or lose the godlike game for man was her soul's issue, thrown with destiny's dice. So, what is the godlike game for man? The transformation. The transformation of man eventually to the next species. The breaking of all laws of matter, laws of karma, to supersede them. To win or lose the godlike game for man was her soul's issue, thrown with destiny's dice. But not to submit and suffer was she born. To lead, to deliver was her glorious part. In her own self she found her high recourse. She matched with the iron law her sovereign right, her single will opposed to the cosmic rule. To stay the wheels of doom, this greatness rose. At the unseen's knock upon her hidden gates, her strength, made greater by the lightning's touch, awoke from slumber in her heart's recess. It bore the stroke of that which kills and saves. Across the awful march no eye can see, awful march of circumstances, karma, barring its dreadful route, no will can change. She faced the engines of the universe. Her heart stood in the way of the driving wheels. Its giant workings paused in front of her mind. So, driving wheels are the wheels of karma, wheels of life. Mother is a heart that stands in the way of it and changes it. Its giant workings paused in front of her mind. Its stark conventions met the flame of her soul. This is again from Mind of Cells. Mother's words. She says, no, I am within, far more within than before. Not within here, she points in her body, but within all things. When I go off like that, it's always as if I was shaping vibrations. And afterwards, I learned that something has happened to someone. Something has become twisted, so you work on it. You set it right again, bring the light, the right vibration. I am speaking here of the body cells, but it's the same thing with external events, even with world events. It's even remarkable with regard to earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, etc. It would seem that the entire earth is like the body. More and more it's a common yoga, the whole earth. And it's like that day and night. When I walk, when I speak, when I eat, it's like kneading dough to make it rise. So we do know that when the mother was very young, like 12, 13, she had this experience of rising out of her body at night wearing a huge golden robe, and everyone who was ailing and sick would be reaching out, the robe would bend down, touch them, and they would go back to their bodies healed. That's when she was young. This is when she was 80, and she had done tremendous yoga every day of her life, or late 80s, much later. So by this time, she had reached a point where she didn't feel she was probably above the world and people were reaching out, but that the whole world was her extended body. And we do know of yogis who can just send prana to diseased parts of their body and heal it. We've all experienced this to some extent in our classes, etc., that we can send our own light to parts and heal them. So the whole world was like this body of the mother, and she says, I used to just send vibrations here, there, change the course of an earthquake, change this, change that, but it was all happening in my body. Mother's words again, I am conscious of the body. But it isn't the consciousness of this. Mother touches her body. It's the consciousness of the body. It may be anyone's body. I am conscious of those vibrations of disorder. So if anyone would come to mother with ill will in those days, she would just throw up, because the ill will would be a vibration in her body, or anyone having anger somewhere would create an eruption in her body, because she'd taken the whole world into her body.
She was embodying earth consciousness at that time.
Yeah. That's what she's written. It's the consciousness of the body. It may be anyone's body. I'm conscious of vibrations of disorder, which most often come in the form of suggestions of disorder. For example, a suggestion of hemorrhage, bleeding. The body consciousness rejects it. So a suggestion comes to her that you're bleeding, there's hemorrhage. The body consciousness rejects it. Then the battle begins. All this takes place all the way down in the cells and the material consciousness, between what we would call the will for hemorrhage and the reaction of the body's cells. It's very much like a real battle, a real combat. All of a sudden, the body is seized by a very strong determination and issues a command. In no time, the effect begins to make itself felt, and gradually everything returns to normal. All this takes place in the material consciousness. Physically, this body has all the sensations, but not the hemorrhage, you understand. But it does have the sensations. So, mother's fighting a hemorrhage which is not in her body. She has the sensation of hemorrhage, the suggestion of a hemorrhage, but nothing in her physical body is bleeding.
So is it like a mental idea?
No. Listen. All right. Once the battle is over, I look at all that. I see my body, which has been fairly shaken, mind you. And I say to myself, what in the world is all this? A few days afterwards, I receive a letter from someone, and in the letter, the whole story, the attack, the hemorrhage, how suddenly the being is seized with an irresistible will and hears the words, the very words that were uttered here. So mother was fighting a hemorrhage which wasn't in her body, and she says she was suddenly seized by a will which said no to the hemorrhage. So whoever wrote her this letter says that the hemorrhage passed away, and probably the person articulated in his thoughts or her thoughts the very words that the mother had articulated in her head. So
it's like experiencing pain which is in someone else's body.
Yes, because it's not someone else's body.
No,
the whole
to her
universe.
it's not, yeah, but
To her
our
it's not.
perception, it would be a separate body.
To our perception.
To our perception.
After the words that were uttered here, the result saved, cured. I remembered my episode and I began to understand that my body is everywhere. You see, it's not a question of just these cells here. These are cells, and my faith in many hundreds, maybe thousands of people, it's the body. That's what is so difficult for people to understand. It's the body. It is no more my body than other bodies, and it is seized with such things all the time, all the time. They fall on it from this side, that side, every which way. It's decentralized, completely decentralized. For instance, if something happens, I don't know how many times a day suddenly the awareness of a disorder, a pain or suffering somewhere in some part, but not a part shut in here. Mother points to her own body, but like a spot in an immense body. And after a while, I learned that someone or the other has had such and such a pain, which was felt as being part of that immense body. It was a rather peculiar night. The body, the consciousness of the body was the consciousness of a dying body, and at the same time with the perfect knowledge that it wasn't dying, and it was the consciousness of a dying body, and with all the anguish, all the suffering, all those things. But there was the awareness that it wasn't this mother's body that was dying. And it lasted a long time. It lasted all night. Afterwards, I learned that X had died in the early hours of the morning. Then I understood. So whatever happened to anyone, particularly those who were connected to the mother as her disciples, she could feel it in her body. And if required, she could intervene and change. That's what she had become.
It's selective or just the people she felt connected to? Just curiosity.
I don't think it would be particularly selective, because of course to say it, I'd have to read her words and quote her, but there was an instance when she was doing the soup ceremony, when she was distributing soup to ashramites after blessing it. And once pouring the soup, her hand just remained suspended like that for a long time. She'd gone into a trance. And when she came back, she said there was a call from Poland. Somebody was calling, and people said that time the ashram was very small. They said, but mother, do people even know about you in Poland? So she said, that doesn't matter. If they call to the divine, I have to answer. So it would depend on the intensity of the call. Anyone truly and sincerely calling to God. And mother is not just this form. We have to remember that she's the Adi Shakti. So any call would reach her and she would reply.
Basically calling to a divine consciousness.
Yes.
And she is that divine
Yes.
consciousness. Whatever form you give it is your meaning.
Yes, yes. Then this is a piece called the supramental contagion. From then on, the key to the supramental action appears. Perhaps we could speak of a contagion rather than an action, really a power from cell to cell. Question of a disciple: all this work you are doing on your body, how can it act upon the corporeal, material substance outside yourself? Mother replies, always in the same way, because the vibration spreads. It's a question of contagion. Spiritual vibrations are quite clearly contagious. Mental vibrations are contagious. Vital vibrations too are contagious. Not often in their finer effects, but anyway it's obvious. A man's anger, for instance, spreads very easily. Well then, the quality of a cellular vibrations must also be contagious. For example, each time I've been able to master something, find the true solution for what we call an illness or a malfunctioning, the true solution, that is to say, the vibration that will undo the wrong and set things right, I've always found it very easy to cure the same things in others through the emission of this vibration. So what Mother's saying is, we know that the last few years of her life she was working on the mind of the cells in her body. And if she managed to change that mind in her body, suppose a group of her cells became immune to the influenza virus, then just by thinking of somebody, she could spread that. It was like without her doing anything, she'd just be present and the vibration would spread from her cells to others. It's called supramental contagion. And at one point, towards the end of her life in Agenda, she tells Satprem, Satprem, I've become very, very contagious. And she had, because so many people, this is towards the end of her life when, a little before she retired, when she was giving darshan but not talking to people. So, I know a friend's uncle who's not even a devotee but just happened to go to Pondicherry and met the mother, and he casually told her that she just looked into my eyes and I fainted. So that's the kind of power she had. People she wouldn't even talk to. She would just look at them for one moment in their eyes and their lives would change. So that's the kind of power she carried and the contagion that spread from her.
It's like that monkey story. That monkey with the stop leaving the thing, what was it?
100th monkey phenomenon.
So it's like if it's at that lower consciousness of species, and Mother being a higher being would obviously have that much more of an impact.
But this is different because here there was no critical mass that was reached.
No, but her consciousness is
her consciousness spread. Yeah. But that's the whole thing. In supramental, like Sri Aurobindo used to always say, I don't need numbers, I just need 100 conscious, sincere men to do my yoga. But he didn't even probably find one who read, or maybe he did, I don't know, but he always says, I just need 100 conscious men. But the level of consciousness that's required is something else. So, it's supposed to spread to, see, when supramental descended in 1956, it descended in reams and reams at the playground. Remember, 29th February is the supramental descent day, 1956. But the Mother says the inconscient came and swallowed it. And it's working from the inconscient. See, Mother often says that all of you, since the time you came to me, you've been asking about the supramental, you wanted it. But when it came down, how come none of you felt it? In the whole ashram, only 5 people felt something different. We had that level of unconsciousness. The supramental descended in the playground with the Mother there, And she said when she opened her eyes, she thought everyone would be lying flat and everyone was just looking around as if nothing had happened. We are that unconscious. So it is there, but we have to develop our receptivity and our sensitivity in order to feel it. So that's how it works, because the entire substance is one. All is one, you see. We constantly forget that. We always have a sense of separation. That's a complete and utter falsehood, because we rely on what our eyes see, what is truly falsehood. You know, it's like an image plastered over something, but it's not true. Even in the most material matter, even in a stone, as soon as one's consciousness changes, all that separation, all that division disappears completely. These are, what can I call it? The modes of concentration or vibratory modes within the same thing. Okay, now this is this is again, I think, Mother's words, yes, very interesting. How many of you were at Darshan in Pondicherry? Oh, how many of you remember in the dining hall of Pondicherry, there is an image of a man sleeping with brown around him, like a figure of light sleeping, and there's brown all around him. You remember, right? Yeah. So just keep that image in mind, because I feel the painting is about what Mother's speaking about. The piece is called The Origin of All Avatars. Today I've been asked to speak to you about the avatar. The first thing I have to say is that Sri Aurobindo has written on this subject, and the person who has asked me the question would do well to begin by reading what Sri Aurobindo has written. I shall not speak to you about that, for it is better to read it for yourself. But I could speak to you of a very old tradition, more ancient than the two unknown lines of spiritual and occult tradition, that is, the Vedic and Chaldean lines, a tradition which seems to have been at the origin of these two traditions, in which it is said that when, as a result of the action of adverse forces, known in the Hindu tradition as the Asuras, the world, instead of developing according to the law of its light and inherent consciousness, was plunged into the darkness, inconscience and ignorance that we know. The creative power implored the Supreme Origin, asking him for a special intervention which could save this corrupted universe. And in reply to this prayer, there was emanated from the Supreme Origin a special entity of love and consciousness, who cast himself directly into the most inconscient matter to begin there the work of awakening it to the original consciousness and love. In the old narratives, this being is described as stretched out in a deep sleep at the bottom of a very dark cave. And in his sleep, there emanated from him prismatic rays of light, which gradually spread into the inconscience and embedded themselves in all the elements of this inconscience to begin there the work of awakening. So what Mother is saying is that in a very basic way to understand what the first avatar is, she said when the world was created and negative elements came in, asuric forces came in, the Divine Mother appealed to the Supreme to save her creation, and the Supreme manifested a being of love who immersed himself in matter. We began by saying spirit involuting itself in matter. So this being of love immersed himself, herself, whatever you call it, in matter, and went to sleep there, because the frequencies were too different. It couldn't be awake and be in matter. So it's sleeping in matter, but even from its sleep, it's sending pulsations of light out into matter. And Mother says this is the first avatar. We have the Dash avatar theory, but the first avatar is this descent of descent. Avatar comes from the Sanskrit word avtaran, descent of God consciousness into matter. So this is the first avatar. So all matter has this first avatar in it asleep. And as evolution happens, this first avatar awakens more and more and needs matter to create more and more conscious forms of it.
Is it somewhat like Vishnu lying down on the, metaphorically like lying down on
No, Vishnu is lying down on Ananta, which is the symbol of wisdom on the ocean.
So his eyes opening and the creation happening, and his eyes shut, creation, like Brahma coming out, the creation coming from his navel.
I don't know that, but Vishnu is the preserver and the ocean is creation, and he is reclining on Sheshnag, which is the epitome of wisdom. So Patanjali is supposed to be an avatar of Sheshnag. So it's wisdom preserving the universe. That's that symbolism. So in the old narratives, this being is described as stretched out in a deep sleep at the bottom of a very dark cave. And in his sleep there emanated from him prismatic rays of light, which gradually spread into the inconscience and embedded themselves in all the elements of this inconscience to begin there the work of awakening. If one consciously enters into this inconscient, one can still see there is this same marvelous being still in deep sleep, continuing his work of emanation, spreading his light, and he will continue to do it until the inconscience is no longer inconscient, until darkness disappears from the world and the whole creation awakens to the supramental consciousness. And it is remarkable that this wonderful being strangely resembles the one whom I saw in vision one day, the being who is at the other extremity, at the confines of form and the formless. But that one was in a golden crimson glory, whereas in his sleep the other being was shining diamond whiteness. So beautiful. She's saying that in her vision, she saw one being who is at the border of humanity and the supramental, because she used to go to all worlds. And that being was very similar to this being who was asleep in the inconscient, but this being in the inconscient was white, because white is the color of the mother's light. And that being at the border of the supramental was crimson, because the supramental light is supposed to be gold and shades of that. In fact, this is the origin of all avatars. He is, so to say, the first universal avatar who gradually has assumed more and more conscious bodies and finally manifested in a kind of recognized line of beings who have descended directly from the Supreme to perfect this work of preparing the universe, so that through a continuous progression it may become ready to receive and manifest the supramental light in its entirety. And it will go on multiplying and intensifying till the entire universe becomes the total avatar of the Supreme. So beautiful. So this avatar is in matter, and it will go on magnifying till the whole universe is an avatar of the Supreme. So this is the secret of the earth, this mother's presence in this being in matter. That is really the secret of the earth. All the mental constructions men have tried to live and realize on earth come to me from every side. All the great schools, the great ideas, the great realizations, the great, and then the religions, that's still lower down. All of it, oh, what childishness, and a kind of certainty deep down in matter that the solution is there. Oh, what fuss, how vainly you have tried. Go deep enough within, stay quiet enough, and then that will be. And you cannot understand it, it only has to be. So mother saying that, and that's why she gives so much importance to the body. She always says, no, that you realize a truth only when you realize it with your body consciousness. That's when you can really live it. Because she's saying that, and a kind of certainty deep down in matter that the solution is there in matter, not in mental constructs, not in escaping the body, not in going away from earth, but the true bliss is in earth. And that's what everyone in mother who sort of are called to do mother's yoga are called to do, to not leave matter behind. All other yogas, they say, realize that you are the self, you are not this matter, and leave the matter and escape into the self. So all the sages kind of, their bodies didn't change, their bodies remained what they are. But mother's whole supramental yoga is about changing the body, to make the body manifest the spirit. So mother has said, no, that this first avatar is there in matter but is asleep in matter. And mother's whole yoga is about connecting with that presence in matter and connecting it to the higher light both, and transforming matter. Now to elaborate on it, there's nothing we can really do to transform matter because it's something beyond our ken. But we can be open to the mother. Mother will do it for us. That's why in his yoga, he says, my yoga, however capable you are, even the elite of humanity spiritually, they can't do this yoga by their own means because it's not possible. You only have to open to the mother, and the mother will work on the body and change it in her own way. You can easily understand why saints and sages, those who wanted to benefit constantly from this divine atmosphere, they had gotten rid of all material things because they weren't transformed. And so they fell back into the old way of being. But to transform this matter is incomparably superior. It gives an extraordinary stability and consciousness and reality. So he's saying if you escape matter into nirvana, it's a bliss. But to transform this matter is incomparably superior. It gives an extraordinary stability and consciousness and reality. Things become the true vision, the true consciousness. It becomes so concrete, so real. Yes, true matter. Nothing else can give that fullness. Escaping, fleeing, dreaming, meditating into the higher planes, all that is all very nice, but how poor it looks in comparison. How poor, so poor. So for mother, the bliss of nirvana would be poor in comparison to letting the body participate in this release. Sri Aurobindo repeatedly says, be simple, be simple. And when he spoke these words, it was like a path of light opening up, very simple. Oh, just take one step after the other. It's curious, as if all complications come from here. Mother touches her temples. Very complicated and very difficult to adjust. And then when he said, be simple, it was like a light coming from his eyes, like this, as if one had suddenly emerged into a garden of light. And when I hear it or see it, it's like a stream of golden light, like a fragrant garden. All is open. Be simple. And I know what he means. Not to let in that thought which controls, organizes, orders, and judges. He wants none of that. What he calls simple is a joyous spontaneity in action, in expression, in movement, in life. To rediscover in evolution that type of condition he called divine, which was a spontaneous and happy condition. So it's a very beautiful thing Mother has said. Sri Aurobindo said, repeatedly says, be simple. What does simple mean? What does simple mean?
The simplicity of consciousness. You're not complicating.
You're not overthinking. You're not over analyzing, over judging, over opinionating. So, see,
we have multiple levels, like mentally, vitally,
yes,
all those little things, like emotionally not being too emotional.
Yes, yes, not needing to think things true. See, Sri Aurobindo is the avatar that is at the transition of mental to supramental. So he was a complete genius, we know that. He was the highest in a way that the mind of man could reach. But he had to transit beyond that with all his genius. I mean, we know he knew 13 languages, he had mastered it all. But when he had that Brahmic realization in Alipur jail, he stopped thinking. He didn't think. He just he just kept quiet. The higher wisdom guided him. That's how he's written the whole of Savitri, right? He said he would just sit at his typewriter in complete stillness, and the words would come without the interference of thought, and he would write it down. Now that is simplicity. Would you believe it that a work like Savitri came from utter simplicity? If he had thought it through, if he had added, subtracted, it wouldn't have had this magic. So that's what he's guiding us to do, provided we have access to this simplicity. If we don't have access to the simplicity he's talking about, we'll have the simplicity of an idiot, which is pointless. You know what I'm saying? So, because Sri Aurobindo is saying don't think, don't analyze, don't judge, and I don't have access to something higher, and I don't judge, I don't analyze, I don't do anything, I'll live an idiotic existence. So, we have to take everything Mother says in the right context.
Here that term like Vivek is required.
Yes.
Discriminating capacity.
Yes, yes. When you are connected to the higher source, and all of us have had flickers of this moment when you're not thinking, you're in that space, and that something is just moving you, speaking through you, doing everything, and it's so simple, it's so completely uncomplicated. So that's the space he invites us to function from.
Can I add something?
Yes?
So one is the connect.
Huh.
The other is also faith.
Faith, but with discrimination. See, Rama, Sri Aurobindo says that bhakti without jnana is blind. We shouldn't have blind bhakti. So, I have faith that Mother's guiding, but I still need to find that fine balance of my personal effort and her guidance. I can't, till I'm totally in sync with her and I'm in that space where she's completely moving me, I can't sit tight and do nothing saying she will move me, because that is a submental existence. We are talking about supramental, beyond the mind, but we mustn't fall into a submental existence.
But even in bhakti, just a plain bhakti, it leads you on to bhajan.
Of course, it leads you on to Gyan, but a lot of people stay stuck in bhakti.
Jnana also leads you to
Gyan also leads you to
bhakti.
bhakti. Vivek is always important, because that's all I'm saying. That sometimes if we pull their words out of context, instead of finding a road to heaven, we find a road to hell. So that shouldn't happen, because they are saying be simple and don't think. Take it in the right context. What Sri Aurobindo used to often say, that I talk about surrender, but when people come to the ashram, the first thing they surrender is their common sense. I don't want that surrender.
There is a fine line you're towing, whether or not you're able to use your brain also. It's like, no, be brainless is not the point.
Yes, don't be submental.
What about that story about that Gautam says everything that happens is happened by the will of Ram, it's happened by the will of Ram.
So he had reached that space, he had reached that surrender, he lived that life of complete simplicity. But for him it was possible, because he was really out of his mind in his surrender, in a good way. But if we haven't reached there and we don't use our mind, then he didn't think, no, he was taken to court, jail, only thought was it's Ram's will. I have no thought beyond that before that.
But then that consciousness is so clear. Right?
That consciousness is the consciousness of
It's not
simplicity.
like it's a calculated thing, oh, by the will of Ram, but in my mind I'm nervous.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
not a manipulated consciousness.
It's not a manipulated consciousness. So I'm reading his words again, it's mother's words again. Sri Aurobindo repeatedly says, be simple, be simple. And when he spoke these words, it was like a path of light opening up, very simple. Oh, but just take one step after the other. It's curious, as if all complications came from here. Mother touches her temples, very complicated and very difficult to adjust. And then when he said, be simple, it was like a light coming from his eyes like this, as if one had suddenly emerged into a garden of light. And when I hear it or see it, it's like a stream of golden light, like a fragrant garden. All is open. Be simple. And I know what he means. Not to let in that thought which controls, organizes, orders and judges. He wants none of that. What he calls simple is a joyous spontaneity in action, in expression, in movement, in life. To rediscover in evolution that type of condition he called divine, which was a spontaneous and happy condition. So we end with this beautiful sonnet of Sri Aurobindo, A God's Labour. It goes, he who would bring the heavens here must descend himself into clay. So that God light, that being, has to descend into matter, and the burden of earthly nature bear, and tread the dolorous way, the way which has a lot of pain in it. Coercing, forcing my Godhead, I have come down here on the sordid earth. What a beautiful thing the avatar is telling humanity. Coercing my Godhead. You have to, sometimes when the Godhead has to descend into its absolute opposite, it has to be pushed into, right? So coercing my Godhead, I have come down here on the sordid earth, ignorant, laboring, human grown, twixt the gates of death and birth. I have been digging deep and long, mid a horror of filth and mire. The filth and mire is matter, because to work on matter, all kinds of revolts and resistances come up. I have been digging deep and long, mid a horror of filth and mire, a bed for the golden river song, a home for the deathless fire. So beautiful. He's been digging mid a horror of filth and mire, a bed for the golden river song. The golden river song is this supramental transformation which is due to earth. A home for the deathless fire. I'll just read this without explanation. He who would bring the heavens here must descend himself into clay and the burden of earthly nature bear and tread the dolorous way. Coercing my Godhead, I have come down here on the sordid earth, ignorant, laboring, human grown, twixt the gates of death and birth. I have been digging deep and long, mid a horror of filth and mire, a bed for the golden river song, a home for the deathless fire. So we'll pause here. Any questions? Anything to share?
This is just an extract of the poem. The whole thing is very long, so
Yeah.
in the PDF, if you click on the link, it will take you to the whole poem.
Yeah. Thanks, Isha. So this is a part of the poem. Okay, so let's sit quietly and let's assimilate. So we remind ourselves of the evolution of matter. Darwin's theory of evolution says that the stone became plant, plant became the animal became the human being. But science cannot exactly say how the first stone sprouted the unicellular plant life. But Sri Aurobindo says that there are two principles, spirit and matter, and spirit involutes, loses itself in matter and works on matter to create more and more conscious forms of life. So a plant is more conscious than a stone, an animal more conscious than a plant, and a human being more conscious than an animal, in the sense that the human being can think in words. But Sri Aurobindo says that human being, so imperfect, cannot be the crowning glory of nature's creative urge. Man has to evolve to the next species, the supramental species, which will function from beyond the mind. Sri Aurobindo, the avatar, at the nodal point of this evolutionary cusp, represented the highest the human mind could rise to. He was a complete genius. Yet, after his Brahmic consciousness realization in Alipur jail, he stopped thinking. He would just be quiet and follow the guidance of the voice of the higher intelligence. And in fact, he wrote the whole of Savitri in that state of utter silence and simplicity. He would sit at the computer in silence and receive whatever whatever was to be written. So he advised, be simple. Sometimes when you're connected to the higher consciousness, don't overthink, don't analyze, don't judge. Just let the light guide you. And Satprem discovered Mother to be the secret of matter, the secret of the earth, because the Mother is a presence in earth, in every cell, every atom, like a light which is kneading the dough of matter, not from outside but from inside. And in many of her accounts, Mother gives beautiful sharings of her experiences of how she had taken the whole world into her body into the last few days, years of her life, and how by setting a vibration right in her body, the person would be healed. Towards the end of her life, she said, I've become very contagious. And this contagion is what's impacting us to this day when we go to Matri Mandir, Samadhi. Even here at Sarkar, we are sitting surrounded by those contagious vibrations. And we come week after week unknowingly to drink and profit from those vibrations the most. So in this yoga, we just have to open to the Mother, be receptive to her light, and let her light do the work, because she is the secret of earth, secret of matter. Hands together in a namaste at the heart. Take a long, slow inhalation. Breathe out with Om.